It's a pleasure to have such a wealth of knowledge and participation for our event today. I really never thought that we would be here on this day, but here we are. It's finally here. It's been months in the making. And on the behalf of Arts Ahead, welcome to Centennial College's Story Arts Center and the Art of Collaborative Management Symposium. Collaboration and partnerships have become a regular commodity in the arts and culture sector. From engaging with communities to cross-sector partnerships, it seems collaboration appears in organizations of all sizes. But what makes these relationships work? Why don't they work? What can we do as arts managers to make these relationships mutually beneficial and sustainable? Over the last semester, we have had the great opportunity to meet arts managers of diverse backgrounds whom have inspired us to explore the topic of collaboration further in the theme of the art of collaborative management. We hope that today will provide you with a deeper understanding and be a space for creative exchange and to make new connections. I would like you all to know that this would not be possible if it were not for the immense support from our program coordinator, Shelley Crawford, whom you'll meet momentarily, Barry Waite, Story Arts Center's co-chair, Centennial College, our donors, sponsors, our participants, our speakers, and of course my colleagues at Arts Ahead, and our facilitators as well for our workshops and panels. They are fantastic. At Arts Ahead, we are a fantastic, not we, but they are a fantastic group of impressive emerging arts managers who are responsible for making this day possible. And I feel privileged to have spent this experience with them over the past few months. Prepare yourself to be challenged, excited, and inspired by the incredible guests that we have leading our workshops, panels, and keynotes, and also by your fellow participants. And before I hand it over to the Story Arts Center's co-chair, Dr. Chris Jackman, I would like to just outline some housekeeping. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask any of my colleagues from Arts Ahead or myself. We're wearing the purple name tags, just with the little purple bar at the bottom. And if anyone's in here, just please raise your hand. They're over there. There's a couple of us over there. We also have tea, coffee, and other refreshments in the hallway, and lunch will be held in the cafeteria on the first floor, and we will be able to direct you later on. And with the generosity of our donors, we have also an incredible silent auction that's happening near the entrance, and it has a ton of tickets to the hottest performances in Toronto, memberships to museums, artwork, literature, and even some delicious homemade pies. Washrooms are located directly down the hallway and to your left, both the men's and the women's. We will also be filming today's event for archival purposes, just letting everyone know. And please feel free to follow us or like us on Instagram or Twitter at CC Arts Ahead, and it's just on that wall over there. And programming coordinators, Melissa and Eve, will be presenting the gifts today, just so that you know who they are and you can put a name to the face. And our gifts were generously given to us by Kevin Sparkman Photography. I want to say once more on the behalf of Arts Ahead, welcome, and I hope you enjoy your day with us. And now, Dr. Chris Jackman.
Thank you very much, Jane. Good morning, my name is Christopher Jackman, and I am the Chair of Arts and Design at Centennial College's School of Communications, Media, and Design. First and foremost, thank you very much for making the trek here with the roads being what they are. It's always the weather, isn't it? You know, no matter how much you've prepared, it seems like there's one last turn of the screw to deal with on opening night or opening morning, as it were. And I think that this particular crowd feels that intimately. I'm sure that over the coffee break, we'll trade some war stories about massive ice storms, about miserable things happening to cast members, to the sound, to deliveries gone horribly awry, and partnerships disintegrating at the worst possible moment. A few inches of slush will seem relatively benign by then. So go ahead. You're at the Story Arts Center. Please tell your story. But there's something else that I want you to share too. And that's the vitality of your work. Because I ask you, why does Toronto need it? Why does the world need it? These events, these programs, the initiatives that you've been spearheading in spite of every minor hiccup or major crisis, And you don't need to recite the whole grant application, but make no mistake, the aesthetics, the ideas, the experiences you produce are the beating heart of our cultural industries. There's an art and a science of it, I think, negotiating that delicate balance between crisis management and vision. And you are on the front lines, all of you making it happen, wherever you may be in your own career trajectory. I'm speaking quite personally when I say thank you very much for that. I'm looking forward to the rich discussions that today will offer. As Jane said, we have an amazing brain trust in this room, people at various points in their careers representing a range of disciplines. I hope to hear from as many of you as I possibly can. For the time being, let me single out our distinguished panelists and thank them in advance for their generosity today. We appreciate your time and expertise. I would also like to highlight the outstanding work of our program coordinator, Shelley Crawford, whose own vision has been integral to the development and success of the arts management program. I hope I would not be premature in asking us to give her a round of applause. I would be remiss if I didn't also note the contributions of Barry Waite, our Chair of Communications and Media. He is unfortunately absent today with us in spirit, but has likewise nurtured this program from its inception all the way to today's event. If you get the chance, be sure to shake his hand and fill him in. And last but not least, Arts Ahead, our arts management cohort. You are brilliant and formidable. The symposium's interest in collaborative management emerges clearly from your own top-flight capacity for collaborative engagement and personal investment. I consider you all to be a true credit to this college, and I'm glad your efforts have borne such illustrious fruit. So, on behalf of Centennial College, the School of Communications, Media, and Design, and our Dean, Nate Horowitz, I am pleased to welcome you all to the Story Arts Center. Thank you very much. I'm now pleased to turn it over to Shelley Crawford. Thank you.
Everyone's going to be in a love fest today. I just want you to know that right now. I'm so pleased to see so many familiar faces here, alumni from other arts management programs I've worked with, students and faculty from sister schools, colleagues, friends from the GTA. Our own faculty are here as well, helping out and supporting us, and so many new colleagues, which is really wonderful. And it's especially gratifying to be here today at one of the best attended symposia in the past 7 years. Get to know that first cohort of our new 8-month postgraduate arts management program. We're housed in this incredibly creative environment, and you can tell from Chris Jackman's talk that this is a great place to really foster creative thought. And we have immense support from senior administration and fellow faculty. It's a very collaborative environment. Our students bring immense knowledge from their diverse undergraduate backgrounds and experience in the arts community. And here in our program in arts management, they've studied all the basics: fundraising, marketing, financial management, technology, leadership, policy, ethics, arts education, community development, and have engaged fully with scores, and I mean that in all sincerity, scores of arts professionals in theaters, galleries, museums, auditoria, and in our classrooms over the past 6 months. Currently, they're in a mentoring relationship as part of the program, and in a few weeks, they start a field placement where they can really showcase their skills and knowledge. Today, it's with great pride that we share their event management capstone project, the Art of Collaborative Management. These 9 students have exhibited maturity beyond their years, resilience, organizational skills, fiscal responsibility, and creativity, not mutually exclusive, I assure you. And they still have a sense of humor. All of these are in demand in our sector. Jane, as the chair who spoke first, has demonstrated true leadership. She has such integrity and is a tireless worker, as are all of the team. Everyone's efforts over the past 5 months have resulted in a superb professional development program that will stimulate and enrich you from start to finish. And fingers crossed, they will, in fact, I hope, accrue a small surplus, which we seldom see these days, when the day is done. I'm really very proud to have been part of this team of emerging arts professionals. Please be receptive to the ideas presented and shared today We want your own thoughts and questions with our outstanding speakers and fellow delegates. Let's truly collaborate and enjoy a rewarding professional development day with one another. And when you're ready, hire these emerging arts managers. They're going to make a huge contribution to our industry, and this is just a taste of what they have to offer. And I'm going to remind you to bid frequently on that fabulous sound auction, but don't outbid me because I'm bidding on everything. Now it is my great privilege to introduce our morning keynote speaker, Nada Ristich. Nada is the Director of Corporate Donations for BMO Financial Group and is responsible for the overall management of corporate donations and community affairs for Canada and the United States. She also serves as Secretary to BMO's Corporate Donations Committee. To many of us in the sector, and I know you're out there, Nada is what we call a force. Okay? She's highly tuned into the arts community locally, nationally, and internationally, and serves on the board of MOCA and Necessary Angel Theatre Company. Nada has also received the Queen's Jubilee Award for voluntary service. She knows the arts, culture, and heritage sector as few corporate funders do, and that has earned her immense respect in our industry and engendered a bit of fear. You can't bluff your way through the integrity aspect of your artistic product, and you better have your financial and management house in order when you apply for funding. That said, BMO has been recognized by many respected sources for their philanthropic leadership, due in part to Nada's contribution as their eyes and ears on the ground. $56.8 million in donations to not-for-profit, charitable, and community-based groups in 2015 is proof they are making a big difference in the lives of many across these sectors. We're keen to hear you today, Nada, and take away the good counsel of someone who has demonstrated personal and professional commitment to the not-for-profit sector, and in particular the arts. I suspect there may be questions from the floor, and it's a real privilege to have you here in person today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't mean to instill any fear because I'm hoping to be lots of Q&As at the end of the session. So, I want to thank Shelley, Jane, Eve, and Melissa for inviting me here this morning to speak at this conference. And I met a number of the students when they visited BMO last fall to visit. They had a tour of our art collection. And we had a bit of a Q&A session back then, and I have to tell you, it was an inspiring Friday afternoon to spend with all of you. To the graduating students here, I want to thank you for having the foresight to focus your education on an area of our economy that is vital in our lives, and that is growing. For too long, the arts have been viewed as nice, but not really important, a frill you pay attention to when times are good. The reality is far different, of course. The cultural industries are now one of the major sectors of Canada's economy. They are a growing player in the creative economy and a key driver of the country's innovation economy as well. The Conference Board of Canada estimated that the annual contribution of arts and culture industry is 7.4% of real GDP, accounting for 1.1 million jobs. As a gross total, that's more than our mining, forestry, and fisheries sector, plus the Canadian Armed Forces combined. And those figures, they're from 2007. In today's creative economy, think how much bigger they are. And it's precisely because the arts are big and growing that they need both sound management and young management. In other words, they need you. Excuse me. I haven't had enough caffeine yet. And it's today when the established global giants, like banks, are looking over their shoulders at someone who's created a new app in his or her garage, it's clear that innovation is driving everything in the world today. If you can innovate, you can survive and thrive. If you can't, you'll disappear. But if you can manage innovation, well, that's the best of all. And as arts managers, by definition, you are innovation managers. So what I want to talk to you about today isn't the need for innovation, but the realities of innovating, Not the fact that you need to find food, but how you're going to hunt for it. The answer is collaboration. There's an old saying, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. So in order to innovate and survive in the arts, you're going to have to go together. You're going to work together with people who were strangers last week, with people who aren't even in the arts, like banks, with people who are sometimes your rivals, people who don't speak your language, and people on the other side of the world. Because innovation doesn't exist these days unless it's driven by collaboration. We see this pattern everywhere. In medicine, no one wins Nobel Prizes on their own anymore. The Google car is being developed on 4 continents. In the world of infrastructure, building bridges, hospitals, airports, and subways, none of this happens without public-private partnerships. Colleges and universities whose silo used to be high and made of concrete are now working together. Centennial partners with U of T and Ryerson. York University partners with Seneca. In fact, it's hard to find a college or university that doesn't collaborate with others. And for me, the most amazing thing about the new Star Wars was the length of credits at the end of the film. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people were involved in making the highest grossing movie of all time. One of the top 5 important business thinkers in the world lives in Toronto. Don Tapscott has written many best-selling books on the rise of collaboration as the driving force in the global economy. In 2006, that's 10 years ago, when Facebook was a toddler, Twitter was a newborn, and iPhones weren't even born yet, he wrote a book called Wikonomics, How Mass Collaboration Changes Everything. Let me just repeat one thing he wrote. I quote, "Collaboration is important not just because it's a better way to learn. The spirit of collaboration is penetrating every institution and all of our lives. So learning to collaborate is part of equipping yourself for effectiveness, problem solving, innovation, and lifelong learning in an ever-changing networked economy." End of quote. This begs two questions whose answers will come from you. How will the arts use collaboration to stay alive and grow? And how will you use collaboration to stay alive and grow in the arts, especially when Canada's economy is less than robust and is in the middle of its own seismic shift? One of my colleagues has these words pinned on her office wall. It's true. There is no creativity without constraints. What this says to me is when our economy is constrained, collaborate. When an arts group's budget, or a bank's budget for that matter, is constrained, collaborate. Because I believe strongly from my over 30 years of working with hundreds of arts organizations across Canada and the US, that will be more creative precisely because we can face more constraints. Let me give you a taste of what that means. I'm going to offer up 2 examples, mini case studies. The first is from a big and long established arts group. The second is from the opposite. Opera by far is the most expensive of all the performing arts to produce and attend. Opera companies everywhere are struggling to find new audiences, new revenue sources, new ways to survive. Some opera companies simply disappear, never to rise again. And that was the case in the 2008 economic downfall. I think in the first 6 months leading into 2009, at least 7 or 8 opera companies closed across the US. But a great exception to that is the Canadian Opera Company here in Toronto. It faces huge challenges, but it's now the 3rd largest producer of live opera in North America. Why? Because necessity is the mother of invention, because constraints have pushed it to collaborate in ways that were truly unthinkable a few years ago. They've also pushed us to collaborate in new ways as well. BMO's been a sponsor of the COC since it first began in 1950. And the creativity and collaboration that emerged from their own constraints has pushed us to become more creative in how we support them in their journey. The COC now regularly co-produces new productions with other opera companies. It also commissions new operas by star directors, singers, and designers. There are 2 impulses behind doing co-productions and creating new productions. The first is to introduce a new and younger generation of people to the joys of opera. The second is to put Canadian-produced opera on a bigger stage in terms of quality and renown. In this case, to help make the COC not just Canada's top opera company, but one of the world's top companies as well. This is where we come in now. Rather than sponsor one production or part of a season, we are helping to underwrite the cost of co-productions and new productions. As you can imagine, creating entirely new operas and doing them with other companies takes a whole new level of collaboration to succeed. This was especially true after the COC moved into their brand new home, the Four Seasons Centre, in 2006. They now had to furnish it, but first they had to open it. The COC had to make most of that opening to let the world know that it now had become one of the world's great opera houses and was a hotbed for some of the most interesting opera anywhere. So they asked us to underwrite their opening week in the next 4 months of new initiatives. We began by sponsoring the live broadcast of opening night at Nathan Phillips Square at City Hall, where hundreds of people had gathered to join an evening of live opera, free. We underwrote fundraising galas, free public tours of the new Opera House, which included mini concerts, and the monumental Ring Cycle, the first production performed at the Centre. I think one of the most interesting things we did was the acoustical testing, where we worked with a number of community groups across the city, and we invited a number of our clients at the bank to come and do the acoustical testing. And it was an evening where it was just magical because you got to hum, you got to sit in silence just to test the acoustics, and it was quite wonderful. And there was a whole new appreciation for the new Opera Centre grew out of that. We then began a program of funding the cost of staging their opera in the new centre. Not just the classics that every opera company shows, but new productions that existed only in the heads of their creators. And because all opera, favorite classics, and daring new directions is fiendishly expensive to put on, the COC had to wrap up its collaboration with other opera companies in order to cut their costs and their risk. That's why in 2011 we helped sponsor Love from Afar, a co-production with the English National Opera and Finland's Vlamsa Opera. A year later, we helped sponsor Tristan and Isolde, directed by Peter Sellers, the first performance of the Sonspine production in North America, which was a co-production with the Paris Opera. By 2014, COC's co-productions had reached epidemic levels. We helped bring Falstaff to Toronto. It was a co-production between the COC, the Royal Opera House Covent Garden, La Scala, the Metropolitan Opera, and the Dutch National Opera. Things calmed down a bit this past year with La Traviata, produced by the COC, the Houston Grand Opera, and the Lyric Opera of Chicago. But not for long. In the next 2 years, 5 of the COC's operas will be co-productions. The trend is rising across all the arts. Toronto's Film Festival, TIFF, regularly partners with other film festivals and institutes around the world, as does the National Ballet, the Stratford and Shaw Festivals, Soul Pepper Theatre, Canadian Stage, and on and on. In fact, it would be hard to find an arts group of any size that doesn't collaborate with other groups to bring new and improved works to the world. But what else is the COC doing in their hunt for new audiences? They're doing something far too few Canadian companies, let alone Canadian opera companies, do. They're exporting. Canada is a huge country with a small population. Our domestic market will always be limited. So it's hard to find new audiences here. It's harder still to reach economies of scale, learn best practices from elsewhere, and compete with the best in the world. And these days, when access to great performances is widely easier than before digital took over our lives, the race to top quality means that to survive in Canada, more and more you're going to have to be world caliber. Yet despite this, only 5% of Canadian companies who can export are exporting. And this at a time when our record low dollar makes that easier than ever. Canadian software companies, medical companies, food companies, and Canadian opera companies too. But many arts organizations don't have either the operating funds or the marketing savvy to engage in market development activities beyond their own city. And that's a perfect innovation challenge I offer up to you. How can you think and act in new ways that will open up new markets for your arts group beyond our borders? And how can you make their products available digitally so even an infinitesimal portion of the 2 billion people worldwide who on a smartphone can access it? Who do you collaborate with, and how to make these crucial things happen in the arts? The good news is it's possible. In March of last year, the Canadian Opera Company took its production of Jean Juan Semele by George Frederick Handel to the Brooklyn Academy of Music. This performance marked the second time the COC had performed at BAM, just the second time. The first time was in the early mid-90s when they took Robert Lepage's production of Bluebeard's Castle of Vartung to BAM to incredible reaction. It's what put Robert Lepage actually on the map with opera. We weren't the sponsor, but that doesn't matter. The lesson here is that the COC understands just how far it has to go to find new audiences. But all this begs the obvious question. How are we, the bank, and the COC, the opera company, making collaboration work? One thing that doesn't work is sending in a proposal once a year. Banks need to plan. Opera companies, where the time from idea to opening night can be years, need to plan. So it's important to do what keeps any relationship healthy and growing, to talk a lot. But while that's a necessary condition for any meaningful collaboration, it's not a sufficient condition. More and more these days, we end up sitting at a round table where the COC and other arts groups we support. We work together on ideas. Next year is Canada's 150th anniversary and BMO's 200th anniversary. How can the COC and the bank use that year-long occasion to reinforce the COC's eminence in Canada and growing reputation abroad? In fact, we started having conversations about 2017 and 2012. The COC is making collaboration work on a local scale and global one at the same time, but it's big enough with an annual budget of $42 million a year to do all this. Now let's go to a completely different world in terms of size and audience. The Art of Time Ensemble was created in 1998 by Toronto pianist Andrew Barashko. Its goal is to change the way you experience live music. So their concerts, now a regular series, bring together dance, classical, rock, jazz, musical theater, and more with artists like Brent Carver, Branford Marsalis, Peggy Baker, and Margaret Atwood. Their budget is still tiny. They perform in Toronto at the Harbourfront Centre and Kerner Hall. Last year, they embarked upon a 12-city tour of the U.S., and in January, they launched their Sgt. Pepper's Canada tour with Stephen Page at the 3,000-seat Sony Centre. We first heard about Andrew from a tip by a friend of mine at the Royal Conservatory who thought he was incredibly talented, and he is. We didn't support Andrew the first time he came to us. The reality is we turned down about 5 requests for every one we say yes to. But we funded him in year 2, knowing that even staying alive financially between year 1 and year 2 is incredibly challenging for most small arts groups. In fact, BMO was Art of Time's first corporate supporter, and we're pleased to plunge today that other companies support it to a greater degree than we do. He was able to leverage our original investment. Why did we say yes to Art of Time? We love the way he thought outside the box and turned traditional art forms like dance, music, literature, and theater on their heads by smudging them all together. In other words, Andrew did something very few artists are capable of. He asked, he ordered that a bunch of very different art forms collaborate amongst themselves. If you haven't seen what happens when that happens, I urge you to catch their interpretation of the work of Frank Zappa later this month at the Harbourfront Centre. And next month, it's Hawksley Workman, who blurs lines between rock music, cabaret, and theater with the music of another Canadian icon, Bruce Cockburn. I chose to highlight the Art of Time and the Canadian Opera Company because they reveal just how collaboration on stage and off can work to everyone's benefit. From these 2 examples, you can take away one golden rule. Be willing to entertain every idea about connecting with other people, no matter how crazy it sounds. In fact, create a time and space each week or month devoted entirely to blue-skying new ideas for working together. Also, find out what organizations like yours far, far away are doing. Get in touch with them. If you're looking for funding, don't just approach the usual suspects like banks. We have to say no far more often than we can say yes. There are all kinds of companies and people out there who have needs that your organization can meet. The same goes for audiences, producing partners and venues, and remember, in those blue sky sessions, there are no bad ideas. Starting today, you will no longer be students of arts management. You will be arts management professionals. That shift in your own life is huge. You are entering a field that is in the midst of its huge shifts, on stage, backstage, online, everywhere. Today, there are billions more who are becoming arts consumers. Half the adult population of the world now owns a smartphone. Just 5 years from now, 80% will. Huge technological changes flooding the world with billions of people who are eager for cultural entertainment and able to get it either at the new concert hall down the street or on their iPhones. But no matter how unpredictable things get, the show will go on because arts professionals everywhere will be there where they've always had to be in order to survive, at the vanguard of innovation. And today, that means learning and perfecting the art of collaboration. You're graduating today with all the qualifications to be an arts manager. You may not think of yourself as being part of a rare breed, but you are, because you bridge two of the most meaningful things in all of our lives. As the British economist E.F. Schumacher once said, and I quote, "Nature and culture are the two great garments of human life. Business and technology are the two great tools that can and should serve them." Thank you, and I wish all of you the best of luck in your new careers.
Don't go far,
Okay.
Nada. Let me just grab this mic for 1 second. I'm thinking that maybe a few people might have come, Nada was a draw. We were very, very pleased to have her here today. And so let's make our most of the time with Nada. And I hope that you have some questions, some comments, some reflections on your own take on this very, very interesting perspective and the case studies, or bring your own situation into it. So are there some questions that some of you might have? It's always hard in the beginning.
You mentioned art of time approach multiple times. So, and over what period of time was that, and what was their approach? What was the approach that they to BMO?
Mm-hmm. Andrew Barashuk came to see me before he had sort of started to experiment with what he was doing, and he was ready to take it live. He came to me towards the end of our fiscal year, and I just didn't have the budget left for it. I knew he was talented. I knew he was onto something. And he came to see me. He had done some more of his homework. I would send him back and to do some more planning. And he came back to me the spring of that year for the following season in the fall, and we agreed to support him for that. But we worked with him on putting his plan together as well. So that's part of the collaboration. But he was extremely talented in doing something new.
I have one.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right, I have to read it because it's a little bit long. So when you at BMO are looking at funding that has a collaborative nature to it, and innovative perspective, obviously, and that's important in any of the arts, of course, how persuasive can one be when it is really a new vision with other partners? How do you get that communication across about your true belief in working together and creating something that is totally fresh and new from what you may have traditionally been doing? And I'm just going to add a few more little bits on the end there. Doesn't that make the application process that much more complex? And my last point that I just would like to bring up afterwards is, does the cachet of an international partnership sway BMO's decision in any way? So there's a whole bunch of stuff packed in that.
That's a multi-pronged question. Chris Lorway is sitting at the back of the room with Roy Thompson Hall, so I'm going to talk about international collaboration at the end. We work very closely with him. I have to tell you, when you're working on these kinds of things and doing new things, it's not the bank's agenda. It's really on the agenda of the arts organization. What are we going to do? What can we fund that's going to move you ahead? Where do you want to be in the next 5 to 10 years? With the Canadian Opera Company, it was great. I mean, they were doing a lot of great productions over the years, don't get me wrong, but they now had this new opera house where they were selling, you know, the orchestra tickets are going for what, $285? That's a lot of money. They had to draw international singers if they were going to be on a world stage and do some new co-productions that would really put their mark on the world scene of opera. So it was really working with their agenda and how we could come in and do something different. I wasn't interested in funding La Boheme again or, you know, Madame Butterfly. We wanted to do new works. So that's really, it was to help them move their agenda forward. But also from our agenda, it was investing in something new, but also, you know, when we look at doing opera, the benefits of opera is also a lot of things, the benefits of our client entertainment. And it was the ability to give the client something new here in Toronto and meet new artists. So that was another thing, but it's really about moving their agenda forward. It's not about the bank's agenda so much, it's about, that's the collaboration. It's you sit down and you have that conversation. Where is our money going to move you? Where's the investment going to move you forward? And that's how I approach it with most arts organizations. So it's not so much on our agenda. International. I think international is important because I think as Toronto as world-class as it thinks it is, it's not. And I think in some arts groups we've become too insular about the Canadian identity, which is good because we have enormous talent here, but I also think we have to look outside for what's going on in the world and trends and see what's going on. I mean, theater in, you know, Berlin or Eastern Europe, you have to be in tune to that, what's going on, and even, you know, in the visual arts world, what's going on in China, and even Asia, Southeast Asia, it's quite amazing. It's why we collaborated with Roy Thompson Hall as part of our 200th anniversary to bring the last tour of Simon Rattle and the Berlin Philharmonic. He hasn't been here in years. And I think Torontonians and Canadians deserve that kind of audience. It's the same kind of, next Sunday, we're sponsoring Dmitry Vorostovsky in concert at Kerner Hall. He rarely comes here. He'll go to Carnegie Hall. It's an hour away, but he doesn't come to Toronto. And I'm glad to say that's been sold out. But I still think we need to see international art in this city. It also allows us to, I think a lot of arts organization, we can draw from that.